Hello and welcome to Doom Does DVD, and this is Disney Classics number 26, Basil the Great Mouse Detective. Now this, just like last week, is another one which I have never seen and know nothing about. So it's one of those which doesn't leave me with very much to talk about in terms of my expectations in the introduction. Though I do find it slightly interesting that on the little leaflet of info about each of these, and on the disc, the film's called Basil the Great Mouse Detective. On the poster itself, it just says The Great Mouse Detective. There's no mention of Basil. I'm guessing that that's something that kind of changed later on after the release, something to add to my research this evening. And so the only thing I can really guess about this one is that it's probably going to be similar to The Rescuers. Possibly it could even be the same universe with a whole secret society of mice doing things under humans' noses. I expect it's not supposed to be directly related in any way, but it certainly gives off the feeling that it might be, or could be. You take the word of The Rescuers, you add a bit of, say, Danger Mouse, and you've got Basil the Great Mouse Detective, maybe. I notice it's another one in association with Silver Screen Pictures, much like The Black Cauldron, so I guess they've got some kind of multi-film deal. Something else I will look more into later. But aside from that, that's about all I can really guess is going to be going on here. Some mice go on an adventure, and there also seems to be a dog. So let's just get on with this one and find out what it's actually about. So at the beginning of this, I became a little worried that I wasn't going to actually enjoy this all that much, but by the time the end rolled around, I had completely changed my mind and was really enjoying it. We start off with a bit of a cold open, London, 1897. We're introduced to a young girl mouse and her father is suddenly kidnapped. Cut to the opening title, obviously this is the mystery that the Great Mouse Detective is going to have to solve. We're introduced to another mouse and he meets the young girl on the street as she's crying and lost and asks why. At which point she says she's looking for Basil of Baker Street. And suddenly it all comes together and I realise that this is just Sherlock Holmes but with mice. The mouse who we've just met is Dr. Dawson, who has just returned from war. And so those mice go off to find Baker Street, and it does indeed turn out that Basil the Great Mouse Detective lives underneath 221 Baker Street. But it was at that point I was starting to feel, that's like, I've seen enough Sherlock Holmes. Particularly after the Benedict Cumberbatch version kind of went on a bit too long and got far too convoluted. I just wasn't really sure if I needed yet another retelling of a Sherlock Holmes story. But as it turns out, thanks to great voice acting, great animation, and fun characters, that I'd been completely turned around by the end of it and was having a really fun time. The story actually made me care about the characters and what was going to happen, which just hasn't actually happened in a Disney film for a while. And add to that, you even got Vincent Price being an excellent villain. The story still has some oddities. There's some really nonsense chemistry related deduction. There's some completely bonkers action that defies the laws of physics. But this is of course in a film for kids based on a series of books for kids. But with that in mind, then it seems kind of out of place to have this whole cabaret section with a sexy mouse dance, and even one of the bad guys' henchman mice gets eaten by a cat, just straight up munched. Those moments felt a bit mature compared to the rest of it, and apparently their whole cabaret part was almost cut for that reason, but eventually made it through. So let's talk about the production. This was apparently suggested as a film they could make much earlier, but was put on the back burner because it was decided that it was a bit too similar to The Rescuers. Obviously this one is set in a completely different time frame, but you could totally make a case for saying that Bernard from The Rescuers is a descendant of Basil or something like that. Unlike the 7 years for last week's The Black Cauldron, this one apparently only took 4 years to make. But it also seems that 3 of those years was just the script writing process, and there was only actually 1 year's worth of drawing, and that was done with the aid of computers. Again, much earlier in the Disney history than I thought had actually happened. But it's actually really interesting what they did here. The whole finale of the film is a whole chase/fight scene around the clockworks inside the Elizabeth Tower. And all those moving cogs and clockworks and things were designed on a computer. but they weren't rendered out as video as you would do these days. This is still only 1986, they don't have that much power. They only built the cogs as a wireframe. They then had a mechanical computer-controlled arm holding a ballpoint pen to draw the animation frames. The human animators could then take those backgrounds, draw the characters on top, and seamlessly integrate it all together. And I found that immensely fascinating. I had no idea they did anything like that. The guy explaining it in the featurette is really excited about it too.
The Great Mouse Detective introduced another Disney first, blending computer-generated animation with hand-drawn characters.
Once we've done the computer graphics on the screen, the computer, with a ballpoint pen and a mechanical hand, draws what was on the screen onto an animation piece of paper. And it'll come out with a drawing that looks like this. Just basically the gears. And with a new piece of paper, I'll put on top of this, and I'll draw Basil running for his life on the gears. So it makes a nice hybrid between computer graphics and character animation.
Basil, look out!
Combining traditional animation with new technology enabled the Disney artists to create an exciting climactic sequence, unlike any ever seen in an animated film.
With the entire room and architecture and gears and beams and a clock face all in the computer's mind, we could then move through the set just like a live-action camera could do, or even more like a helicopter can do. So when the characters are running like this up the gear, the camera's panning and moving along with them in tremendous kind of shots that aren't normally possible in an animated picture.
Other production things I said I was going to mention, the title. Originally, and while they were making it, it was under the working title Basil of Baker Street, which is the name of the book series this is based on. But some executive decided that Basil sounded too British, and so for American audiences at least, the title was changed to The Great Mouse Detective. But in all the non-US English-speaking countries, you know, Canada, UK, Australia, that kind of thing, they kind of combined the two and it became Basil, The Great Mouse Detective. And so that's where the inconsistencies in the title come from. It was even when it was re-released in the US in 1992, but then they gave it the title The Adventures of the Great Mouse Detective. Looking at it from the perspective of 2020, it seems like something that could have been such a massive franchise. It really seems odd that there are no sequels to this. There could have been many adventures of these guys. Although I did find a couple of things online mentioning that there might be a sequel that either was supposed to come out last year or might be coming out next year that wasn't entirely clear. Probably some production issues. But there wasn't a lot of info, and I don't know whether that would count as, say, Disney Classics 58, or whether it's just one of the weird direct-to-video sequels that don't count. I also said I was going to mention the Silver Screen Partners, who have had very prominent displays of in association with on the last two films, and will do again in the future. But it turns out they are not anyone that has any creative input on the project. They are purely just an investment group. They're just a rich group of people putting in some money towards the production of the film in return for a percentage of the gross of the profits that the film makes. And so that's about it for The Great Mouse Detective. Actually, a super fun adaptation of Sherlock Holmes. Interestingly though, there's no mention of based on the works of Arthur Conan Doyle or anything like that. It's instead based on the book Basil of Baker Street by Eve Titus, which itself is more of like a children's fun parody of Sherlock Holmes. And my guess would be that at this point in the 80s, Sherlock Holmes is already in the public domain by this point, so they don't legally have to mention that at any point. But that's just me randomly speculating. Overall, I really enjoyed this. It's probably one of my favourites so far. What are your thoughts on this one? Let me know about those in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next week with Oliver and Company.